Yes to everything. All right, and yes to everything. As you know, whatever cockamamie question I come up with, you have to answer yes, and you have 1 minute to make us believers. Round one. Emile, are you an alien?
Let's do it. So yes, Tamer, I'm absolutely an alien. I think someone with my the fortunes that I've had cannot possibly be considered human. I think what even is human if you think about it? Like alien goes on to think, extraterrestrial, right? But if you think grounding terrestrial human, right, does that not imply a certain locale or place of origin? And I feel like something with me, with my upbringing, I can't really say that I've had a certain place of origin. I feel like nowhere is home. And in that sense, maybe I don't feel like grounded in a community or a culture. And that makes me somewhat in my own mind extraterrestrial in the sense that I don't know if I belong. You can think like ET, where is home kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That's a little short. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, it's okay. That's all right. Let's keep talking about that because
Yeah.
are actually quite similar. Like you're Japanese, Greek, and I'm sure and Dutch, some other things in
Mm-hmm.
there. I'm Egyptian, Austrian. So we already grew up kind of in between cultures, and now
Yep.
you're jumping in between countries. So at the end of the day, it's almost like you're a free agent. Like you're is that how you feel? That's how I feel. I feel
Absolutely.
unattached to any particular culture, and that means all the baggage that comes along with that culture is also not mine. And you don't need to, you know what I mean? I just feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I get to move freely in between all of that. Is that how you feel?
I absolutely feel that way. I think the most of me connects to Canadian culture more than anything, but I wouldn't call myself solely Canadian. And that, like, I don't know if I can relate 100% to an average Canadian's issues or even politics and things like that. And absolutely, I feel somewhat fluid between my cultures, the places I've been, and specifically the places I've called home. Because you asked me today, what's home? Where do you feel connected? I couldn't give you one answer.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like those Olympians that when their countries get sanctioned from the Olympics, but they
Mm,
still allowed to compete under the UN flag. And so you're kind of like that person that you have kind of almost a global passport instead of it's a single country passport.
mm.
But in any case, what an interesting way to grow up. And it reminds me of Sting's song. Whoa, I'm an alien. You know that one?
Yeah.
I'm a legal alien. I'm
Yeah.
an Englishman in New York.
Great
Anyway,
song.
we're all aliens every time we go somewhere new. And we're like
Yeah.
a fish out of water. You're an alien. That's what the definition of alien is, just a feeling foreign in some place.
Yeah.
All right. Round two. Do animals have rights?
I think absolutely, Tamer. Animals have rights. I think a lot of human culture has removed themselves from animals, and we've consistently seen ourselves as greater than animals. But on a physiological, biological level, right? We are mammals. We are mammals. We reproduce the same way as an elephant or a horse or something like that, right? And so how can we say that animals don't have rights if we give ourselves the same right? What distinguishes us? A certain consciousness, a certain intelligence doesn't really make sense if you consider that animals in their own rights have intelligence, right? And it's reflected at a global scale and a national scale as well with animal welfare and laws and things like that. And considering that animals feel pain, right? Recent studies have shown that there are certain animals that have that consciousness that can recognize themselves as a self, just as we do. And so, how could they not have rights? Is my question.
Well, one distinction between animals and us that I can think of is
Mm,
there are no rules which allow people to hunt us down and kill us indiscriminately to maintain our population or something like that. So there's recourse with when our rights are violated, something happens. But if someone goes out and shoots a bird, what about their rights? You know, who's going to
Yeah.
enforce their rights?
Well, when you say controlling populations like that, it makes me think of and it's somewhat gruesome things like genocide in humans. Right? There are no rules, but it does happen, and it's very unfortunate when it does, and that is in some ways, of course, there's like racial ideologies behind that, um, a means of seeing that as population control. And in the same sense, like an endangered species, when you go out and hunt it, there are laws, right? There's enforcement there, so that that species is protected, and in that same sense that we are. And so, to say that they don't have rights in the same sense feels a little anthropocentric, like human oriented,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
somewhat narcissistic as a
You know,
species, which of course, we are.
of
So,
course, you can't take the lion out of a lion. But listen, one of the things we do in class, one of the questions that comes up, because there's this amazing picture that I have of a cat that somebody did a taxidermy on their cat. They stuffed their dead cat and then turned him into a flying drone. So the cat is flying around with a dead cat like this.
oh
And the question is, can people do what they want with the corpse of their dead pet?
Mm.
And so, what do you think about that question and how it relates to animal rights or the rights of propriety? And like, if you own a pet, is that your property? I can do whatever I want with my coffee cup or my pet.
Yeah, that is definitely an interesting question. I think from like a human point of view, we definitely think that we own our pets, right? You pay for them, for example, they're seen as goods. Um, Unless you pick up a stray off the street, your pet is either bred, right? Or you buy it at a pound or a pet store or something like that, right? Or sometimes even taken from the wild, but then they are sold as commercial goods. So in that sense, I think most people would think of pets as propriety. But my I don't think there's anything stopping you necessarily from doing that, but I think on an ethical, moral level, to parade your cat around as a flying object feels wrong. I think intrinsically, most people would agree with you that I don't know if that's the biggest,
But I think that's the
compliment to
best.
your
I think
pet.
that's the best barometer from moral issues, because it
Mm-hmm.
just comes to what's does it feel right or wrong, and probably a lot of laws start with that feeling. This
Yeah.
just feels wrong, so we got to put a law in place to stop this. And I heard actually once upon a time when I was interested in law, somebody said environmental lawyers are kind of on the forefront of the careers, and they don't defend laws. They actually
Mm.
create laws, and that's their job, is to go out there and see what needs protection out here, you
Yeah.
know. and
Yeah.
and so, all right, let's get on to question number 3. Are you ready? The tough one. Are you ready?
I'm ready for the challenge.
All right. Now, presuming the technology is available, should parents be able to genetically design their child? So, in other words, should they be able to broaden their shoulders of their
Mm.
child, make sure their hair, that they have hair in the first place, or that they have wavy hair, that they have bigger eyes, or
Yep.
whatever it is? Should parents be able to kind of put their finger on the scale of genetics if the technology is available?
All right. Well, I think absolutely parents should be able to genetically design their child. And I think the question comes into play specifically when we're talking about things like genetic diseases, right? If you can remove, let's say, some kind of increased risk for any kind of disease, whether it's cancer or Alzheimer's, or something life threatening like that, why wouldn't you? Is there not an ethically, a moral obligation to prevent harm in that sense, right? A lot of our diseases that humans come up with and are unfortunately afflicted with, there's this hypothesis that says that because they appeared later in life, that let's say natural selection cannot root them out. And so we are constantly accumulating more and more late life diseases. And so if we were able to genetically remove them, why wouldn't we? Right?
Yeah.
Ethically.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous point, and that on that I completely agree. So we would find common ground if we were debating. And it's
Yep.
like not just diseases, but like in my family, for example, you see this little bump on my nose here? I got a little bit of a
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
That's I got out lucky, but every single female in my family from the Austrian side has got this, but eccentric like a beak of a nose. And so my mother
Okay.
and her two sisters all had to have the rhinoplasty surgery
Oh wow.
to
Yeah.
change their nose. So they all had to go through that suffering and great expense.
Yep.
My sister did it, same thing. And so I'm thinking, if we know that's in our family and that it's going to lead to this kind of expense later on and the suffering, so why not genetically program our kids to not have to deal with that? It would almost be like an economic decision if we could do
Yep.
that.
Now, I agree with you that absolutely, if it's to remove suffering, that makes sense, right? Why wouldn't it make sense? However, the complexity of genes makes it so that not everything is completely genetically based, right? There's an interaction of your environment, and this is well studied. That whole nature versus nurture debate has been
Yeah.
largely shown to be both. It has to be a combination. Your genes interact in your environment, right? And so the same gene in one environment and the next can have different results. And this is where that complexity kind of comes in, right? And I think there has to be a certainty that the basis is completely genetic if we are going to implement that, right? For those same ethical reasons. Because if you were to change something and it turns out something worse occurred, or the result was more painful, or there was more suffering involved, or a worse disease that then is passed on into multiple generations, that's a catastrophe, right? So there has to
Yeah.
be ample
Yeah.
analysis done
Well, I think
beforehand.
something like this kind of falls in the category of playing God. And
Absolutely.
we know that when you do that, you might achieve your desired result in the moment or in the immediate, but then you create a whole bunch of unanticipated consequences that you're going to have to deal with one by one as they
Yep.
occur. All right. Great job, Emil. Let's move on.